Welcome to Transformed, Dr. Singh. Um, as you know, we want to explore the big questions shaping education in India today and how that impacts every citizen's well being. I'm your host, Vinati Dev, and today's episode is about a foundational issue that doesn't get nearly enough attention, which is early childhood education. Nearly 200 million children in India are under the age of 6. What happens or doesn't happen in these early years shapes everything from brain development to long term learning outcomes and obviously employment. Yet, ECE, as you rightly highlighted in our first conversation, is not a legal right. Millions of young children remain outside quality learning environments. And today, I want to unpack the progress and the deep challenges, Dr. Singh. You are an associate professor at Ambedkar University with a PhD from University of Illinois and years of field research across India and the United States. Dr. Singh, you are one of the most respected voices on early literacy, teacher training, and early childhood curriculum. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Viniti. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. And I really look forward to our conversation. And I also think that, this is a very appropriate time to have this conversation on early childhood, especially given all the, very recent changes and there is a lot of momentum that is being built in. And so I think all voices are extremely important at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Dr. Singh, you've worked with national and international agencies on ECE, and NAP's vision is also in place, but it's still not a legal right. And I know that's where we began our conversation. Why do you think this gap persists? And what would its inclusion in the larger right to education change on the ground?
Okay, so thank you. I think that's a very important question that you have asked. So, we know that we have the right to education as a fundamental right for children from ages 6 to 14 years, but early childhood care and education, that is ECCE, remains under Article 45 of the Constitution, the Directive Principles of State Policy. So as of now, it is a policy aspiration more than a legal mandate. So before I answer the question, I want to also talk a little bit about, how, having ECC as a fundamental right, it would be, it would make a major impact in the sector because, it would automatically kind of enable a more, structured, a more equitable system for ECC, and every child can actually benefit from quality learning, regardless of what kind of a background they would be coming from. Now, actually, when this policy was launched, the 2020 policy was launched, the years building up to the policy, there was, a widespread speculation that, probably ECC at least 3 to 6 years would also be included in the policy. However, it was not. So I am not really in a position, to say why it was not, but I could probably just lay for you, some of the challenges that comes in, in working in the area of ECC, and also, what could be some of the reasons why it is not. So one is, of course, you see the term itself, early childhood care and education, ECC, so which talks about the care component. The care component is fairly complex. And then there is the education component. So ECC in itself implies an intersectoral collaboration, which means that, we need to have some sort of a unified vision, which means that it involves the health sector, it involves the women and child development, and it also involves the education. Now the education ministry, because education is now under the ambit of the Ministry of Education. Another very big challenge, of course, as we know, is the funding. Funding, everywhere is a very big challenge. That is one. There are other issues also, that there is also, too much disparity. So it is difficult to point out, one particular factor, but I think the complexity and, the terrain of ECC is extremely complex. The terrain is extremely complex. So,
Dr. Singh, this is, you're saying that essentially this is health. This is, of course, maternal health, because that's where how little the child is at that moment with the first caregiver. And there's education. The complexity of the complexity of early childhood care and education, to implement it, and then intersectoral ministries in place, and then funding. It is certainly very, very complex. What do you think needs to be done to reduce complexity? Because in terms of how to take care of, an infant, early years, brain development, its association with language learning, its association with foundational numeracy and literacy. What do you think needs to be done to reduce complexity and focus on implementation? I mean, I know it's a big, big question, but just your view on that.
okay. So I think one thing I probably missed out in the previous point that I was talking about is advocacy. Because you asked, why is it not, that is a question we are all asking, that why is it not a right yet? So I think, those of us who are working in this sector probably also need to do more advocacy for the rights of the children. Now, you've asked a very, very complex question. So I'll, try to fumble a little, some aspects of it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is taking from the aspect of advocacy. The first thing that I want to talk about is, the need for all of us to understand, why ECCE is important. And even now, every conference, every seminar, every workshop that I go to, we are shown the Ekman curve. I am sure you are familiar with it. I think you showed it in your own workshop also. So the Ekman curve, basically, it shows that from birth through 5-6 years, children's development across all domains are at the peak. And, whether you're looking at language, whether you're looking at numeracy, whether you're looking at hearing, whether you're looking at physical development, social development, emotional development, which means that that is the time when we need to invest the maximum. Now, why do we need to invest the maximum? Because if you invest at that time, keep in mind, it is, early childhood is not an isolation in itself. These are your children of the future. These are, your children who are, who are going to be running your country. These are your children of Vikshit Bharat, actually. And so this, this Ekman curve, and not just Ekman, but a lot of studies that have looked at impact of quality ECC have shown that there is a very strong case of return, which means that if you spend $1, if you spend 1 rupee, you get returns anywhere from 7 to 10 to now we say about 13% of what you have actually invested. And this is in terms, and when we talk about investment, this is in terms of, it could be in terms of saving on services for disability, in terms of incarceration, or, any other, anything else. And so what you are investing in is, having good citizens. So that is one. Other than that, there are, so what I'm trying to say is that there is a need for a basic understanding that ECC is important. So I think advocacy is one thing that I would like to focus on. Now, you've asked a very, very complex question. So, and because, I talked about earlier also, this whole intersectoral, need, and the need for collaboration, and it makes, it makes the work that much more challenging. So that is one, as far as your governance is concerned. There are also other, other issues which we need to take with us when we are working in this field. So another one also is the issue of, equity and inclusion. There is too much diversity, there is too much disparity in the country. And when we say ECC, we are not just referring to, one kind of a preschool, or, specific kind of Anganwadi, or some kind of a private preschool. We are referring to the whole spectrum, and there is just too much disparity. Now, you asked, what is it, what is it that, we need to do? So I will try to answer some very broad, in some very broad ways. So as a right, definitely, we need to find ways of addressing equity and inclusion. And for this, an enhanced funding is extremely important.
Yeah.
So that also goes along that, because, if you don't have funding, there is not much that you can do. And I guess, because of the health issues, the immunization, nutrition, funding becomes even more complex for this particular age group of children. In others, in terms of, because you also asked about implementation, kind of. So the good thing is, in ECC, what has happened since 2013, I should say. 2013 was a very good time, because 2013 was a time when the first national policy on early childhood care and education was launched, the National ECCE Policy, for the first time in this country. And along with that policy came two other documents. One was a document which was the curriculum, the National ECCE Curriculum Framework. And there was a third document, which was the National ECCE Quality Standards. So these three documents were launched in 2013. So momentum began, kind of since then. And with the 2020, the national policy in 2020 that came, the great thing about this policy was that ECC was upfront. ECC was upfront, and the first section is ECC. So, suddenly it's, if you find everybody talking about ECC. And so I think one very good thing has been that there has been a concerted effort and support from all, from governments at all levels. So that is one, but a lot of work still needs to be done. So that is one aspect of it. And recently, you might be familiar, there are more documents that have come up, which has kind of aligned ECCE with the national education policy. And I think another very positive change has been that now at least the 3 to 6 years,
Mhm.
3 to 6 years has now become aligned, has become a part of the 4 stages.
Yes.
So now the 3 to 6 years is also a part of the foundational years, and which is how it should be.
Mhm.
Because, across the world, early childhood actually has been seen from birth to 8 years.
Correct.
It is only in our country, and I guess because of the different ministries or whatever may be the reason, ECC was only 3 to 6 years, and from six years and above was all primary and education, etc. So now the ECC has come under the ambit of foundational education, which is seen from 3 to 8 years, and so a lot of work is beginning
Mhm.
to enable this kind of an alignment,
Mhm.
because it is not easy. It is not easy, to work on this, because there are a lot of structural challenges. There are challenges of professional development. There are challenges of curriculum, and there are, of course, challenges of the curriculum. But I think, this is a very big step, and this is also a very important step. Another, uh, and this also, uh, involves a very fundamental change. This also involves a very fundamental change about Poshan Bhi Padhai Bhi, which kind of acknowledges the significance of ECC. And so NCRT has launched, in 2022, NCRT launched a National Curriculum Framework for foundational stages. And the Women and Child Development has also launched, 2 different curriculums. One is Navchetana and another one is Adharshila. And they both focus on the, early stimulation, on the FLN, and and both are also aligned with the India's goal under NIPUN Bharat. So the curricular component also becomes very important, and in terms of what is it we need for the launch, there are two other. So right now I will very quickly talk about two other very important issues. One is, of course, the infrastructure. So infrastructure is extremely important in terms of having building, clean water, toilets, spaces for play. So unless you have that infrastructure, a very good curriculum can do little if you don't have it. And I hope the situation will change, slowly, because I am also familiar. I have seen Anganwadis in Delhi which are running in, rooms which are barely enough, maybe around, less than, mostly 10 feet by 15 feet or something like that. So that is not the aspiration, definitely, but we hope that these will change. Play becomes very important. So there is a lot that you cannot do if you don't have spaces. Another very important component is also the professional development. But I have to say that in a lot of the Anganwadis in Delhi, I have seen Anganwadi workers, in that tiny space, they will do, a lot of these activities with children, and, they'll bring a bucket, and the children are engaged, children are working. But still, we do need to have those open spaces. We do need to have a very good infrastructure. And I think professional development is also very important. And, when I say professional development, not just in terms of learning how to do activities, but when I say professional development, what I mean is that, uh, as the whole cadre of individuals, who are professionals in ECCE, and not just, learning enough to do activities on a daily basis, but also in terms of professional growth, because, that is where the motivation really comes from.
Dr. Singh, you've unpacked this very clearly. There is complexity, there is need for advocacy to get it done as a right, early childhood education. Um, that you say will have a massive impact on funding. That itself will have an impact on infrastructure, which is needed. And right now we have sort of the Anganwadi Didi, as she is known, carrying a superb weight on her, and she manages what she manages. I think what you're saying, but she should actually be enabled, trained, and paid, because in one sense, if you can imagine, she is carrying the weight of the future of Vikshit Bharat. Um, and I hope that this virtuous cycle that you're speaking about, which is the right and the investment and the professional development and pay of early childhood education educators happens, because I think we are a little bit behind on that in terms of prioritizing it. Um, Professor, one of the things that kind of becomes a debate, and I think an informed debate is necessary now. Of course, the research is very clear on it. But please speak to us about this idea of early childhood education in the local language. I think there are misunderstandings around this, particularly because when we talk about vernacular, the debate around English and aspirations and employability comes in. But as an educator, uh, please speak to me a little bit about, why is it that early years are important um, for 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 children to learn in their local language?
Okay. That's a very good question, and actually very close to my heart, because I work in the area of language and literacy. So first of all, so one is, I will talk a little bit about language and multilingualism, and a little bit about emergent literacy and numeracy also, which is a very integral part of the national education policy. Now, just to explain to you with an example, when a child grows up in their family, uh, now language acquisition, as we call it, oral language acquisition, that is something which comes naturally to all children. So if I ask you, do you remember when you said your first word? None of us do. Our mothers, our fathers, our families might, but we don't, because most of us, say our first word somewhere around 1.5 to 2.5 years, and we don't have memory of that. The wonder that we have is that by the time a child is 3 years of age, that child is almost, fluently able to communicate everything in the language that they have grown learning. They like something, they don't like something, they want something, they've dropped something, they've hit somebody, and they are very good. They are able to manipulate a lot. They are, they can tell you stories, they can even create stories, they can create, they are very good at creating fiction also. So, most of us have seen 3-year-olds becoming very, very competent with oral language, at least. Now, what happens when this child goes to school? Now, keep in mind that for that 3-year-old, oral language is not just a means of communication. See, for me, as a fully grown adult, I could use oral language as a means of communication, but I also have other means of communications. I can, I can write emails, I can write papers. So, I have many other means as well. But for the child growing up, their entire worldview is communicated through oral language.
Mm-hmm.
So, if they've gone to the kitchen, what is in the kitchen? They've seen a paper, they've seen the nani, they've seen the dadi, everything, they go to a lake, garden, potato, tomato, anything. Their entire vocabulary, their entire worldview is communicated through oral language.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happens when this child steps into a preschool, any preschool? It could be a private preschool, it could be an Anganwadi, it could be a home-based school, it could be anything. Now, there could be 2 or 3 scenarios. One scenario is that whoever, is whatever is being taught in the school is in the same language as a child.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no gap. So the child will transition very easily. A second scenario that could happen is that a child steps into a classroom where the language of instruction is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be anything. It could be from Hindi to English. It could be from, maybe Santhali to Odia. It could be from, Bhojpuri to English. It could be any variation. It could be Odia to Hindi. It could be any variation. Now, what happens in that scenario? Now, keep in mind the 3-year-old. Keep in mind that the cognitive development, the language development are at their peak around this time. So when the child steps into a space which has this very already an alien environment. Now keep in mind that for the child, coming from the home to the school, this is already quite quite a major, you can say, dislocation or, change in the landscape for the child. The child is already in a very unfamiliar territory, and the child already has to make sense of what is in that room, because, suddenly they are seeing blackboard, they are seeing a duster, they are seeing these pictures on the wall, they are seeing, so it's a very unfamiliar, the teacher is unfamiliar. So the child has to make sense of that unfamiliar territory is one. And now if the language is also different, we are also taking away from the child the only means of communication regarding what is, what the child is, is seeing. And what happens is that it has a very deep impact on the language and the comprehension. And so in that very alien setting, many times what happens is that for a certain period, it could be, anywhere from 1 or 2 months to 6 months, the child may go kind of silent in the school, because the child does not have the resources to communicate at all. And it would also impact. Now, remember, when the child is at home and asking questions, asking questions is a critical ability for children to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So what is happening is that, active learning, talking, speaking, fighting child, the child has now become this very passive and silent child. They may be talking in their home language, but they are not able to make sense because they can't communicate in the school. So that is one major reason why we say that initial instruction has to be in the mother tongue. So the second thing is that the same age group. Now remember, we have all seen those curves. Language development actually is the peak around this time.
Mm-hmm.
It begins at birth, and around 2-3 years, up to 5 years, uh, 6, 7 year, even later, language development is at its peak, which means that children do have the capability of learning more than one language and with ease. So what it means is that there is no reason for us to restrict children uh, with only the mother tongue or only the school language. So it is important that we understand and we tap into this ability for children, uh, you know, to be able to at least comprehend, uh, multiple languages. And I'll just take one more minute and I'll tell you there was a very interesting study that was done in the United States. This was sometimes in the 90s. Now, what they had done, they had these American and Chinese babies who were all born in the US. And this is before, I think when they were like 3 months to 6 months. What they did, they had, they would play audio sounds. And what they found out was that babies as young as, 3 months or 6 months or so, were able to discriminate between sounds, English sounds, and sounds which were in Chinese. They had different groups of babies. One group of babies, uh, they exposed them through an external person to Chinese. One group of baby had no such exposure.
Mm-hmm.
They did the assessment with both the groups, and what they found was that the group of babies that did not have the exposure, they could not discriminate between the sounds in Chinese, but the other group was able to do. The point that I'm trying to make is that the brain has elasticity at a very young age. So, instead of being conservative about, this language or that language, we need to make a concerted effort to expose children to multiple languages because they do have the capability of learning it. That is one. The third thing, to answer your question about English, it's a very tricky question, actually. But see, anybody who works in the area of language or literacy, they will never say that, once a child turns 3, you ask children to forget about their mother tongue and just do English. That is not the right approach at all. And I don't think anybody would advocate for it. The challenge that happens is that many times parents ask for it.
Correct.
And so teachers have little choice but to, give in to English education. But I will tell you, I have seen plenty of schools, even in Delhi, where, where instruction is bilingual. Children are free to use, whatever language they have been speaking at home, and it makes me very happy. However, it does not mean that there should be no exposure to English.
Mm-hmm.
Because why do you want to deny those opportunity? And this is also something that has come from different states, from parents who have been advocating that, why do you want our children? So, going back to my original point that I was making about the capacity and the capability that very young children have for different languages. So we need to plan instruction very carefully, because bilingual or multilingual instruction, it may sound easy, but that is not something which can be done very easily. And so here the professional development of the Anganwadi workers also comes into play.
Yes, Dr. Singh, actually, there's so much empathy in your voice when you talk about, the little child who is so confident at home in their mother tongue. Um, and is now dislocated emotionally to a new school and suddenly feeling that they know nothing. I mean, all of us have walked through airports when language instruction is written differently, and we all face that cognitive dissonance and that fear. It takes us a little bit more time to get attuned. We look to other people, we're kind of quiet. Um, and I think, the planning is so critical because on one hand, you're saying, research tells us that mother tongue in early years is crucial in order because they're at their peak to pick it up, to be confident about it. They're also elastic enough to have exposure to other languages as time goes on. But bilingual instruction itself is a complicated ask. And this is back to the quality of instruction, whether at the early childhood or in early primary. And it comes down to um, the teaching cadres, whether it's the Anganwadi Didi or the early child. And come back to investment. And I know that I think there has to be a heightened awareness on this. The government has been focusing on FLN, but it looks like by the time you hit FLN, you're already a little late. The ASER survey was talking about only 40% of 4-year-olds in rural India can do a cognitive sorting task. By age 5, only 40% or more can identify language letters. And I think so. It is now upon, I think, government and state governments to realize the kind of early investment that is required across the board: infrastructure, professional development, facilities, and also just being pedagogically sound on mother tongue first and then exposure to other languages. Um, Professor, I want you to now sort of give us a little bit of a personal reflection. You have seen education closely. What do you think needs to be done in terms of speed? It's an intergenerational project. We change our mind on curriculum as governments sometimes. Sometimes we change our mind on funding allocation. Now we are converging across ministries. Um, but to have a certain pedagogically sound, focused investment, what do you think needs to be done? Where is the urgency lacking? Because we have enough expertise. Just a personal reflection. You've been committed to this space for so long. What do you think needs to be done?
So one thing I will continue from the previous question you had asked about language. So one thing I'll begin with the curriculum aspect of it. There is a lot that needs to be done actually. But since we've been talking about aspects of curriculum, so I'll begin with the curriculum aspect. So one thing I was very happy to see in this document, the National Curriculum Framework for Foundational Stages, which was launched in 2022, there is a lot of focus on oral language development.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, given the very, very uneven landscape that we have in India, the diversities in, the language, the social, economic background that children bring in. And I can tell you, I have been to, we were working in a project in Rajasthan. So we went to a lot of rural areas and we went to villages. We would go to homes of children to talk to the parents. I went to homes where I could not find a shred of paper. There's not a single shred of paper. So, children coming from and my experience is very limited. So, and there are, I don't know how many children coming from such homes. So, so one good thing is that we are bringing the focus on oral language. We are understanding the significance of oral language. When we focus on early childhood, we are not, rushing into the 3 hours. Because you see, what has also happened, I think, in this country is that for decades, we have not had a national model curriculum for ECC.
Mhm.
The only model, we have had is for school education.
Mhm.
And, which has typically been very textbook centric.
Mhm.
And so what do you do for ECC? You think that ECC should be a watered down version of what happens in class 1, and that is not the case at all. So with oral language, the other good thing that has happened, which I see in all these recent curriculum framework documents also coming in, is a focus on emergent reading and writing.
Tell us more, Doctor. What do you mean by that for the audience? Emergent.
Okay, so emergent reading and writing, uh, this is not a new framework. This is a framework which was, which was coined, I would say, in the 70s and the 80s. These are terms which have come from works by, Goodman, Clay, etc. There are many scholars, William Teal, who have worked on it. I'll just explain very briefly. So this is the emergent framework, was the understanding that the concept of reading and writing, it does not begin on one day. Now, one example I give my students always is riding a bicycle or learning how to drive a car. Have you learned how to ride a bicycle?
Yes.
No. So did it happen that, you're riding one day you step on the bike and you just start riding?
Not at all. Many fall-offs, many
So
bad.
there are a lot of, process that you go through. You're learning to, hold the handle, and then, you can hold the handle, but you don't know how to look up. You're looking down, you're not able to pedal. So, it's like every component is working in a different manner. And so it takes a lot of practice. It takes some time when you are able to get together. Now, let me ask you a second question. Does it mean that, this process that you go through has nothing to do with the process of cycling? You know,
Probably
it
does.
has, right? So even though you were not, quote unquote, a fluent cyclist at that time when you are learning, but uh, you cannot deny that process. So emergent literacy. So in the 70s, that was the notion. What a lot of these researchers realized is that even though children were not, fluent in, they could not form those letters, A, B, whatever, or, 1, 2, 3, 4, but, they were looking at books. They were, doing what we call pretend reading. They would look at the cover, they would because what they were doing, they were looking at what adults were doing around them. And they would be, turning the pages, and, sometimes they would pretend to, read a story, like you will find in our environments. You will also find children, they will take a pen and, they will scribble something. It has no meaning at all. But there is something, but what they are doing is that, because this is something which is around them in a literate environment, they are, quote unquote, copying what the adults are doing. It has meaning for the child. So this, and they could continue, and sometimes, they will even, maybe learn some letters, maybe they can write their name, maybe they will draw something. So, there is this whole process. So now, even in our documents, we are beginning to understand and give value to these, writings and readings by children. And this is what is referred to as emergent literacy. It could be emergent reading, it could be emergent writing. So that, and so with that acknowledgement, what is the good thing that is happening is that we are not expecting perfection from young children. We are not expecting that, okay, now you have come, now this is how A should look. So the idea is that you allow children to engage with books, you allow children to engage with print, you allow them to come up with their own writings, you allow them to draw freely, you allow them to express their own ideas. And just one more point, given your earlier question that you had asked about kind of what is important. So of course I will always go back to the first question I thought was a very important question that you asked was ECC as a right. I think it is still very important, and we must continue advocacy for that. Second, I think if I have to put it briefly, I would put it as an enabling ecosystem. And in enabling ecosystem will actually include everything else that I have talked about. And so in terms of curriculum, in terms of professional development, in terms of the infrastructure, and also the health component, and also referrals. We also get a lot of children with disability. What kind of services, support systems we have for children with disabilities, that is also very important. And basically what I'm talking about is an equitable system. And and another very important component is also some kind of an empowering of the teachers or the Anganwadi workers. I think that is also very important. And I said professional development for professional growth is something which is something we should aspire to if we really want the field to grow.
I'm going to speak to you here because I think you made a very, very crucial point. We want the legislation to work. We want investments. You mentioned it's 13% on every rupee spent. It's the highest in terms of education. It saves us costs across the system. At the moment, the current reality is that the Anganwadi Didi is holding fort. You're speaking to empowering her, enabling her from a professional development perspective because she has to grow as a professional. What do you mean by empowerment? Do you mean better remuneration? Do you mean better training, lesser load on other things she may be doing, external support? Speak to her, because it seems to me that from legislation to investment to ministries of education, at the end, here is the Anganwadi Didi who's actually holding fort. So what do you mean by empowering her?
Okay, so it's a very complex question actually, because once you step into an Anganwadi and you see what the Anganwadi worker is doing, you realize the challenges the worker actually has. Now empowering actually comes in many forms. So and empowering will come not only by looking at the individual, by also looking at the context, by looking at the ecosystem. So you need to empower her also, you need to provide better infrastructure. That is one. Another very important component that I want to talk about is that, which is something you will hear off and on, and it is also documented that the Anganwadi workers, so anytime there is a Aadhaar drive, there is, during COVID vaccine. So anytime there is any other initiative, the first to get pulled out for these is the Anganwadi worker. So that is something we have to be a little vigilant, because if you keep doing it, then it is the children we are not paying attention to. So I think that is also very important. There has also been some amount of advocacy on increasing the number of Anganwadi workers in Anganwadi, especially that have 20 or more children. So I think that is also very, very important because, our expectations are also too much. No? You have somebody who is anywhere from 10th to 12th pass. Sometimes it could also be 8th. Sometimes it could also be MA. So, the qualifications are very, very, there is a wide disparity in the qualification, and there is a lot of expectations on this Anganwadi workers. So one is, of course, proper infrastructure, proper personnel, ensuring that they are not pulled away from the task. And, there has also been a lot of debate, some amount of, and sometimes people present technology as a solution. But I think, technology can be used as a support mechanism. Technology cannot be the solution. In fact, for a lot of the other works for which the Anganwadi worker is pulled out for, maybe we can use technology for that. And maybe we can use technology, for those kinds of documentation, because what is needed is documentation. So, so that, she is freed up of, those kinds of responsibilities. Another is that, there has to be investment in professional development. I will talk about one additional thing over here, because, what is also happening is that when it comes to ECCE, we kind of also remain confined to looking at the Anganwadi worker. Yeah. While ECCE is very broad, I'll give you one concrete example. In 2023, after the policy, the National Council for Teacher Education launched a 4-year integrated teacher education program, 4-year ITEP program. And the 4-year ITEP program was launched in 4 different stages. Now, these were the same stages that corresponded to the school stages in the National Education Policy, namely foundational for 3 to 8 years, preparatory for classes 3 to 5, middle 6 to 8, and secondary 9 to 12. So the foundational 3 to 8 years. Now, what has happened is that in our country, we have to also recognize that this is actually a very significant effort by the government, because this is the first time in our country that we have a nationally recognized undergraduate program, degree program launched that talks about the professional development of teachers who are teaching in preschools. This is the first time it has happened, because earlier, or even now, we have had DPSC, which is the Diploma in Preschool Education. We have had NTT, which was the Nursery Teachers Training, which was earlier. But no, this is the first degree program. However, if we look at, the institutions that are launching it, there aren't many. Got it? So the thing is that for teaching in school, B.Ed is compulsory, an undergraduate degree, and now a 2-year B.Ed is mandatory. So not necessarily looking at the Anganwadi worker, but, we should also not, now there is a very concrete initiative by the government. We have to also see how more institutions can take up and, probably launch this ITEP foundational for 4 years and bring in more, knowledge base into ECC.
That's fascinating. So expand the pool of very trained and qualified ECC teachers. Um, so there's a supply side constraint, but there's some aspiration associated with the degree, with the formal degree. So there's a signal there, but I think a lot of public and private institutions will have to step up and offer that. This has been a fascinating conversation, Dr. Singh. I'll reserve my right to have a follow-up conversation on more complex topics, both from, since you mentioned we all have to continue to advocate investment, infrastructure, quality of teaching, not thinking that the technology is a solution for Anganwadi Didis, but it certainly can enable the automated tasks. And we have to free them because I think sometimes we confuse the act of teaching as facilitation versus making sure that you guide to that bicycle riding. It's a complex task. I don't think a standardization could work so early. And I would love to have another conversation definitely on vernacular, oral, and emergent reading and writing, because the little ones actually deserve that once they go from home, safety of home to a learning environment. Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. It's been a fascinating conversation, a nuanced one, an urgent one, that draws out the challenges we have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. This was, I enjoyed the conversation as well, and thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.